What's up? My name is Avery. You may have just seen me on TikTok, YouTube, or Instagram, and I recently bought and listed my first short-term rental on the short-term rental platforms like Airbnb and VRBO. And in order for me to feel confident about buying a property, I was able to use my short-term rental calculator that allowed me to know that when I was going to buy this property, that it was going to cash flow well, that it was going to be a good investment, and that it made sense for me to help myself achieve financial freedom through investing in real estate. And I think short-term rentals are a great way to do that. I do not only just have short-term rentals because I wouldn't keep that as just my only type of thing that's in my portfolio. I like to have some diversity there, and also I think short-term rentals are a little bit more effort, but with that effort you can achieve far more cash flow than with a long-term rental, so that's the trade-off there. But it is a pretty simple calculator, and it'll make you feel confident about knowing that the deal that you're going to buy is going to be a good deal. So hopping into it, we have some cells in an Excel file that you can fill out, and then the rest will update themselves, mainly going over purchase price assumptions as well as expenses that you will have with Airbnb that are going to be a lot more expenses than you would with a long-term rental. So one of the biggest barriers that people have, I think, with short-term rentals is understanding the nightly rates, because they fluctuate, there's different seasons, and there's different occupancy rates, and it's not just bedrooms and bathrooms that can affect how well your property will perform. There are other factors, like if you have a hot tub in the backyard or a putting green or some other amenities that other properties might not have in your area that can get yours to stand out, and then you can charge more money, have more cash flow. Those things are a little bit more difficult to figure out, and kind of up to you to create that factor that will make your property more enticing for people to want to book. But some great ways to figure out what the actual rental price would be through AirDNA. It's a cool software that people use that kind of gives you an understanding. I don't think it's the end-all be-all best way for you to figure out what your property could rent for, but it just gives you an idea if this is a decent market for you to invest in, seeing some of the nightly rates as well as the occupancy. But I wouldn't just base it off of that. It's just a good starting point. Some of the other things that you can do and things that I think are better is that you can see where this property is and then go on Airbnb, look at other properties around it, and pretend to book it. Pretend you are someone who is trying to book that 3-bed, 2-bath place that has this extra amenity, and you are going to have a similar property but with a better amenity, and you want to know how much the nightly rate is during the week, so pretend to book it. You want to know how much the nightly rate is during the weekend, so you pretend to book it. And then you do those same things during off seasons, and you do those same things during the high seasons, like maybe the summer, it's more expensive, and you can just get a pretty decent understanding of what the nightly rates might actually be. And then you could utilize AirDNA to get a good understanding of what occupancy rates are, and then arrive at your complete nightly rate after doing those two things. And then the third thing that I think is the most important, and one of the best tips that I heard from one of my friends who's been doing Airbnb for a long time, is just call a short-term or vacation rental management property group and ask them how much you could receive for this type of property in this area for a nightly rate, and just say that you're interested in getting short-term rental management because you want to buy property in this place, and they'll just give you some good information and help you understand what you could actually receive. So once you've done those few things, you can start filling out this spreadsheet because you feel confident about the nightly rate. But pretty simply, you can just have your purchase price, and I'm just going to go over the numbers of what it looked like on the property that I actually just bought. So my down payment was definitely not 100%, 10% down payment, and I had a 4.125% interest rate. That might have gone up a little bit recently, and my closing costs were around $15,000, even though I had a closing credit around $5,000. Second home loans, which is what I used, have a pretty high closing costs. They changed them this year actually, so they were more in tune with investment property closing costs because many people use them for this reason, and banks caught on to that. So that's why they've gone up quite a bit. I say that for your furnishing costs, it is roughly about $7,500 per bedroom, and that obviously you might be thinking, well, that doesn't take into account other rooms. I use that as taking into account other rooms. So my furniture costs for this 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,800 square foot property with outdoor furniture were about, I think it was $23,000 actually. Also did a decent amount of thrifting and getting stuff from Habitat for Humanity Restore, but that's for a different video. And my rehab costs were pretty high because I did a lot of extensive renovations on the property. So that's what we ended up getting to. Let me get that correct there. So total cash invested, yeah, around $130,000 is right. Obviously, not every Airbnb is going to need that much money invested, but because I did a big rehab cost and I got a lot of value out of that, and the property is now worth roughly $525, that was a pretty decent return for me. So we get our average daily rate, which right now I'm keeping it pretty low at around $230 a night, just while I get reviews, because I'm not a super host. I'm just trying to get reviews because those are worth a lot, I think, early on. And average occupancy have around 70%. So feel pretty good about that projected monthly revenue. Actually, in my first month of July, I've had about $7,000 of revenue, and I listed on June 25th, so I think that's pretty good. Taxes, you can always go to Realtor or Zillow and look at what it comes up as, or look at the county's property assessor database, and then you can stick these numbers in here. Insurance, I think 125 to 150 is usually a fair guess to put in there, and you can always talk to an insurance agent. Water bill, I figured that guests might use more water than I might use. So far, my water bills have been $50 to $80, but obviously it's better putting in more expenses, and if you have less expenses, then that's cool. Electricity, also it's been a lot less, around $80 to $100, but I just put $200 in there because we're in the height of summer and people use the air conditioning a lot. Wi-Fi and TV, that's something you're probably going to want to pay for guests, because when people are going, they're going to want to have Wi-Fi. Right now, my cost for mine is $75 a month, and I have high-speed internet. It's kind of one of those introductory rates that you get for the first year, so year 2, 3, 4, will probably go up a little bit. The repairs and maintenance, this budget's probably a little bit high also, but again, I like making it more conservative, and if it ends up being better and I make more money, that's awesome. Kind of a cherry on top. Supplies, probably around there, maybe a little bit less. That's for like paper towels, olive oil if you want to get guest snacks, toilet paper, whatever it might be. Pest control, I find this to be an issue pretty much everywhere, especially where I bought this property in North Carolina. There's just roaches and ants. It's just kind of a normal thing in this place because it's pretty humid. Trash removal, I do pay someone to actually bring the bins to the street and back, and I don't put that on guests, especially where I bought. There's a lot of weird rules about making sure that the trash bins aren't out past a certain hour, or else you can get fined. So it's also the same person who would pick up supplies for me, and her husband is actually a handyman, so it's a pretty cool team there. And then some of the other expenses that you might have are using various softwares for property management. So I use Guesty, not sponsored by that or anything, and I also use PriceLab. So Guesty enables you to have a one calendar for all of the platforms that you put it out there on, like VRBO and Airbnb, and also allows you to do automated messaging, which is very helpful for when someone books or when someone's checking in. And then PriceLabs is a really cool tool. It's like $10 a month, and it just will create your prices based on various demand, seasonality, and lower the prices during the week, and kind of do all of that for you rather than you trying to figure all of that out. And lastly, I do lawn maintenance. I have a kid who comes every couple of weeks, about every 2 weeks right now, and then in the winter he'll come less, and that's $40 or $50 each time he comes, depending on what he does. And lastly, Airbnb takes a 3% cut, VRBO takes an 8% cut, and Booking.com takes 15%. Something to think about. And right now I self-manage. If you were managing, that can be up to 25% of gross rents, which is pretty high. So this is what all of the expenses come out to. And then also capital expenditures. It's good to have a budget to save for that, which can be saving for a new roof, new hot water tank, new furnace, new air conditioning system, whatever it may be, bigger things that aren't typically monthly expenses. And then with our cash flow calculations, we have our monthly revenue, monthly expenses. So with that $300 a night at 70% occupancy, we're getting around $2,700 a month in cash flow, $32,000 a year. And your cash on cash return, which is how much money you invested into the property to acquire it and get it to rent it out, and how much money you'll receive. So this essentially means that every year I'll receive 25% of my initial investment, or it'll take roughly 4 years for me to get my initial investment back, and then everything upon there is infinite return, just from a cash flow perspective. This doesn't take into account appreciation or principal pay down or some of those other cool benefits that real estate has to offer. And lastly, on the second tab, I have just future projections, because as time goes on, your expenses stay pretty much fixed. They go up a little bit, but at a much lower rate than your annual revenue might go up. So the area that you bought in, maybe you're just getting reviews in year 1, and year 2 you can increase those nightly rates, or it becomes more desirable because you bought in a cool area that more and more people are going to. So those things can go up over time, and you can see how over the years your cash flow will get higher and higher. So hopefully you guys like that overview of the calculator itself. Maybe it was too in-depth, maybe not, but it can be a really great way for you to feel confident about buying your first short-term rental so you can help achieve financial freedom in your life.